Hello, it is Wednesday, April 12th, 2023 at 8:40 a.m. Eastern Time, USA. I'm Mitch Miller. This is my video journal. So, just wrapping up before I go on this trip to Costa Rica tomorrow morning. Flight leaves at 6:05. Couple things I wanted to cover. And one other excursion we talked about at this resort that me and Hillary joked about is to see if we could take a boat to Isla Nublar, the island in Jurassic Park off the coast of Costa Rica. Right, I believe the name was changed to that island for the book and movie. I was a big fan of Jurassic Park. It came out when I was in middle school or high school. I read the Michael Crichton book, Jurassic Park, in high school. And so we talk about reference points for the supercomputers, and they're analyzing people, they're profiling people, right? So here's a reference point. After I read that book, I used, it might have been Google Earth, the beginning of Google Earth. It might have been just maps available on the internet. But I used the internet, and the first time I looked at a location on a computer outside of the United States was the island chain off of Costa Rica. I zoomed in as far as I could using Google Earth or the maps. This may have been from my parents' house in Utica, which had 4 users of the same computer. So now you can narrow this down to activity that I actually did. It may have been in a college dorm. I believe it was at that house in Utica, though, that I used a mapping system for the first time to look outside of the country at an island chain in Costa Rica. So, if we use that as a reference point, say every time I looked at a map throughout my lifetime, it was logged in Google Central, Google headquarters, or whatever, right? If they're tracking that type of thing. So you can see how a normal person that doesn't want to use technology to spy on people necessarily, unless you are the computers and technology themselves and you're trying to prevent great catastrophe. But as a human, I don't want to use technology necessarily to spy on people. You can see how I used mapping systems throughout my lifetime. If you use that as a reference point, I used MapQuest in college to get directions to all the locations in the suburbs of the houses I was estimating. So thousands of entries into MapQuest. I used Google Earth and Google Maps a fair amount, but I never really used it to look at other countries unless I was visiting there or wanted to visit there. One time I did zoom in on China just to see if the street names and stuff would come up on China. I wanted to see if Google somehow got permission from China to map all of their streets and street names and stuff. I wanted to see the expanse of Google Earth, Google Maps. I believe that's the only time I zoomed in on China. I don't think I ever really looked into Russia. So I've never used these satellite systems and this technology to spy on other countries. And you can kind of, what's going on, Zeld? You can kind of see the habits of certain people. There's a difference between looking into something somewhere that you want to travel someday as a fantasy, even though you can't afford it, looking at the business districts, the businesses, the hotels, and there's a difference between that and looking in the cul-de-sacs and streets and looking at the street view of people's houses, especially if they're not on Airbnb, right? That's stalking behavior, that's spying behavior, that could be dangerous behavior, right? And that represents people that want to sit behind a computer and use technology to spy on people. So that's what I have to say about Isla Nublar from the book Jurassic Park. If we are able to secure the Russian oligarch ship, and for some reason I'm approached and briefed in the helm of that ship in the bay in Costa Rica, I'm not going to waste time when we need to get to Ukraine and Europe as soon as possible by taking an excursion to Isla Nublar. That can be some other time on somebody else's ship maybe, but just something we joked about. Hillary did rent the book Jurassic Park and the Lost World, and the book Lost World from the library. She always gets books that have to do with the locations where we're going. So if you're on the fence about whether you should fund my project to have a neutral vessel that supercomputers can work with, here's what I would recommend. Subpoena or request a message, a Facebook Messenger conversation between myself and Don Shakti. Just ask for that one messenger request. He's a former nuclear technician, right? And I talk about in the plot in the book M, I talk about these coincidences happening. 2 or 3 coincidences in one day. And it makes you think, can the computers read your mind? What's going on here, right? It's also schizophrenic, right? So a lot of people probably shun that book off as these are schizophrenic symptoms. He's putting us in the mindset of a schizophrenic so that we can see what it's like, right? And I would tell my wife about these coincidences, and she kind of brushed them off, told my family, they brushed them off. But I believe it was supercomputers contacting me even way back then. So I captured these coincidences in a Facebook Messenger conversation. On March 29th, it was Dawn's birthday. I woke up very early, 3 in the morning. By 5, I was on the computer doing my normal routine in the morning. Dawn's thing popped up that it was his birthday. I remembered he had messaged me in Seattle with an audio message, I believe was hacked, or a supercomputer allocated his account to contact me. So I wrote that to Dawn. I wrote, I don't know if your thing was hacked, sorry I didn't check the message, let me know if it was really you. And I wrote in that initial message at 5 something in the morning, I usually try to establish ground contact or ground communication when I travel in a plane. I do this by using a landline, and oftentimes I call the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, King of Prussia office here in Pennsylvania. So I wrote that 5-ish in the morning. I said I didn't know if a supercomputer got your account to confirm things. So then later that morning, I go out and get the News Herald newspaper, News Herald and Derrick newspaper of Franklin, Oil City, from my parents' newspaper box. It's March 29th paper. They canceled their subscription, but sometimes when my car is parked in the lot, when the lot has a car parked in it, they still give us a newspaper. So we're not supposed to get the newspaper. We got it anyway. I get it. There's a feature in the newspaper called 22 Years Ago Today. So in 2001, it has a couple paragraphs about what happened in 2001. And then 1979, March 29th, 1979, the thing that the News Herald newspaper chose to publish in that regard was that the 3 Mile Island nuclear plant continued to spew radioactive material into the atmosphere in 1979, March 29th. So a little bit of a coincidence there, right? I mentioned the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Then the newspaper is talking about a nuclear meltdown, right? So I snapped a picture of that article and I sent it to Dawn. I said, look what was in the paper. I hadn't read it when I contacted you. Look what's in the paper. Go through my day, normal routine. Evening, sit down to watch Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune. Wheel of Fortune's on first now. Jeopardy's on second. Sitting there watching Jeopardy, and one of the clues is the symbol for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and it says the NRC is known for this, blah, 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 because it was acronyms. And the answer is, or the question is, Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So that's one of the clues on Jeopardy. Another coincidence, another interesting one, because I had just mentioned it early in the morning. Those programs are pre-taped like a week in advance. So the chances of these lining up are very slim. I thank the Watson supercomputer for that. So I backed the TV up. I took a picture of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission symbol on my TV. Texted Dawn, said, look what the clue was. Or I messaged Dawn in Facebook Messenger and said, look what the clue was on tonight's Jeopardy. So I captured all those coincidences in one concise messenger stream. And so that's worth looking into, subpoenaing or gaining access to show your elected officials, look, this guy is in tune with supercomputers, look at these coincidences, he says these happen sometimes multiple times a week to him, used to. They don't happen that often anymore, but they still happen. Alright, so if you're having trouble with Operation Oligarch, getting this ship, acquisitioning this ship, I don't want to own the ship, it'll be military property. I'm just using it as a neutral vessel to engineer a peace in Eastern Europe and between Russia, right? If you're having trouble, it could be rooted in supercomputers acknowledging the original Constitution of the United States. If you read the original Constitution of the United States, it says the head of the Navy is the Supreme Court of the United States, right? So we need to disregard that and go with the branches of the military that are on board for this, excuse me, especially because the Supreme Court of the United States has a Nazi sympathizer in it. At least one, there might be more, right? Clarence Thomas is chummy with a Nazi sympathizer. We have a major situation in the United States government. That's one of the three branches of the United States government has a known Nazi sympathizer in its ranks. So if the holdup is getting permission from the head of the Navy, the head of the Navy is actually the Supreme Court to some people, and that's why I reference that. What are you doing, Zeb? That's why I reference that in at least one of my videos in Denmark. I say, hey, look, it's a statue, head of the Navy, why don't you do this? I'm actually criticizing the Supreme Court and not the Joint Chiefs. You sneezing, Zeb? What's going on, girl? You alright? You getting on camera? Alright, so that could be holding us up. What do? We have a Nazi sympathizer in one of the major branches of one of the main branches of the federal government. Well, the deadline for this program that I've given the military is the date 4/20, April 20th. This is a interesting date in history and in pop culture. 4/20 is known as a stoner's holiday. It's a marijuana user's holiday. I forget the lore behind why they chose the number 4/20. Something to do with clocks or something. But at 4:20 p.m., 16:20 p.m., and 4:20 a.m., potheads, stoners, marijuana users all over the country and all over the world choose to light up, especially on this day, April 20th. But it's also Hitler's birthday. April 20th is Hitler's, I believe it's his birthday, it might be his death day, but I think it's his birthday. So keep in mind, supercomputers, that government agencies, police departments, they have to secure warrants. So you're really going nuts, girl. Secure warrants in order to listen in on people's houses, conversations, cars, so on and so forth. But you supercomputers, these people choose to carry your eyes and ears around with them. So what I would recommend in this extreme case of a situation in the federal government is to monitor for people celebrating on 4/20 that are not known marijuana users. Right? If they're celebrating something on 4/20, on April 20th, they may be celebrating Hitler's birthday. They might be a Nazi sympathizer. So, we really want to scrutinize the elite and the wealthy for celebrating on this day, because they have a lot more power to overthrow the government, to bring Nazism back into the limelight, so on and so forth. So that's just a recommendation. You may want to make a note of those people and investigate them further. Again, it's something to think about. So the last thing this is probably the last thing unless something else comes to mind. We have the head of the Navy, Supreme Court. That may have been changed in later amendments so that the President actually is in charge of the Navy. But if you read the literal terminology of the U.S. Constitution, the Supreme Court sits at the head of the Navy of the United States. That's part of the reason why I said that they are invalid, because they do not try to inform the public about what is illegal and what is legal in this country, so on and so forth. It's a corrupt branch of the government. So I want to talk about this peace treaty. So on the river cruise from Amsterdam to Switzerland, I am going to make my additions to the peace treaty, to the international peace treaty. And what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to, at that point, look into what the workhorse fighter jet of the military of Switzerland is. Switzerland is known as a neutral country and may be the most neutral country we can find on the planet at this point, even though they have taken sides in the Ukraine conflict. They traditionally are neutral. I guess Chile is too, but since we'll be in Europe, we're looking at Switzerland. What I'm going to do on that river cruise is look into the workhorse fighter jet of Switzerland. This will raise red flags. People might focus on that ship, focus on the internet, focus on my devices. I'm going to look see if I can figure out what the payload is, the max payload of that fighter jet. How many missiles, how many bombs, how many guns, what the max payload is. And we're going to set that as the max payload any new generation unmanned drone fighter has. So those will be the specifications in the peace treaty, if you're going to build unmanned fighter drones to patrol the skies, the max payload they can have is this payload with the, you can vary the array of what's on there, but that'll be the max amount of equipment that can be equipped onto that unit. So this puts us all on a level playing field. Then it's just all up to supercomputers fighting supercomputers, hypothetically, right? So that'll be in the peace treaty. A standardized equipment array for unmanned drone aircraft. That being said, we have Greece. They just launched their first drone carrier, a vessel, a waterborne vessel that launches unmanned drones. Apparently the brother of the Prime Minister or President of Greece is highly invested in drone aircraft manufacture. So it's fitting that we chose Thessaloniki to launch from for the Operation Oligarch program. So the thing I want to bring up in these forums that we do around Europe as we travel around and hopefully deliver peace, the thing I want to bring up to experts is that you have automated missile defense systems, which are basically robotic missile arrays that target incoming missiles and shoot them out of the sky, right? So the question I pose ethically is maybe Ukraine stays out of NATO, right? Because Russia fears them joining NATO because NATO will covertly put nuclear arms on that ground, on that land, hypothetically, right next door to them. So hypothetically, Ukraine stays out of NATO for some time. What if they fielded tens or hundreds of unmanned drone fighters to patrol the skies and highly invested in artificial intelligence, military-grade artificial intelligence, to automate that system like a missile defense system and have flying unmanned drones flying over Ukraine to protect the skies and protect it from missiles? What are the ethics of this system? Surely the artificial intelligence wouldn't want to start a nuclear war, so would it be as deterred from attacking Russian ground by their nuclear arsenal? Would, hypothetically, Russians stage drone attacks to try to say that that technology is out of control, so on and so forth? So what are the ethics of developing this system where artificial intelligence flies unmanned fighter drones that are fueled and supplied by human workforce, military? So that's one thing I want to bring up in these forums, just as consideration. So again, I've talked about multiple additions, cameras on troops, so on and so forth, that can go onto this peace treaty. I will work on that on the European River Cruise if I have time. Should have some time in the evenings. So yeah, flight to Liberia, Costa Rica tomorrow morning, or tomorrow at noon. And even if we don't have agreement among the intelligence community about these borders I've drawn through my travels, saying that they have to use one valid passport that they closely align with instead of using multiple passports, even if the intelligence community doesn't come to consensus on that, I feel that supercomputers have shown me some signs that they are in agreement and compliance with this, so they have their ways of monitoring passports and bank accounts and so on and so forth. So I feel like they're on agreement with that. Yeah. I think that's all I had to say. Again, I'll be taking a USB with all of these videos with me to Costa Rica, putting it in the television of my hotel room, if it has a USB drive. If not, I'll put it in my laptop on the Wi-Fi. And it may take you a while to get through all these videos, but a supercomputer can upload and analyze them in a fractions in seconds, right? They can get all this information in seconds. So this will go out to more supercomputers, more artificial intelligence. And I do want to say this, like I said, we want to investigate the banking industry. We want to investigate as much as possible for corruption in the government, in the corporations, in the most powerful structures of the United States and the world. Speaking as someone from the disability community, we want to be helpful in society, so keep in mind that there are TTY and TTD equipment and networks that I'm sure supercomputers and artificial intelligence can access and use to report this fraud and corruption. So don't hesitate to pose as a disabled person using TTY or TTD to report findings and fraud and things like that. I'm sure you'll try to help disabled people like you help me, and verify their home addresses and make sure that their equipment is working. And it might actually work to keep that equipment in place instead of letting the technology experts, the techies, develop some new system which is just probably insane to most disabled people. They want their own network, and if the supercomputers use it to help, I think they'll be okay with that, right? We don't want to develop a new system relying on some new computer technology like linking up all of our aircraft to some satellite system without thinking it through. So let's do the forums. Let's work on the anti-corruption, the Periscope, the Anticore in Ukraine. Let's build back a better Ukraine, a transparent Ukraine, a neutral Ukraine, and see how they develop their defenses with or without NATO. And let's have these discussions. Let's come to a peace agreement here in Ukraine and throughout the world, how they rebuild transparently without corruption, without taxpayer dollars, military dollars going into the pockets of a few greedy corporate executives. That's what we're proposing. I think we can move forward with this as soon as possible, and I hope you'll work with me. And hey, I'm hoping that I'm approached by a technician or someone in Costa Rica to move forward with this process and develop the ways we can start investigating the banking industry through my bank accounts and things like that. So if not, I'll continue to move forward with the nonprofits, make a new podcast promoting the campground, so on and so forth. But I probably won't report if I am approached on this video journal. I'll just keep moving forward, and people will be able to glean whether that happened or not. So don't expect a confirmation on here that I was approached by the military or the government or anything like that, but I'm hoping that we can start to work in this fashion. Thanks for watching. Join me in a week when I probably debrief about parts of Costa Rica vacation.